Welcome to the Squid Game, the Broken Game. Welcome everyone to our last episode of the Squid Game, the Broken Game podcast. I am Dr. Lee, your honorable host, and today I will be discussing the final philosophical issues behind the games and plays and the Squid Game. From the last episode, we discussed about the fairness of the Squid Game, how it contradicts with the will of the frontman, and what it might mean. Today, we'll be talking about a slightly different topic, not fairness. Instead, today we'll be talking about the voluntariness of the participants of the Squid Game, their will, their spontaneity to actually participate and play the game. Why does voluntariness matter so much in discussing the philosophy of game? Well, we can listen to the answer from various philosophers. But specifically today, I want to talk about a philosopher named Suits. Suits is well known for his contribution to the philosophy of sports. He divided sports or any related fields into three main areas: game, sports, and play, and analyzed differences and similarities between those. In his theory, Suits divides the world of play and sports into two realms: the world of amateurs and the world of professionals. And voluntariness was a very important standard that distinguished these two different worlds. Well, strictly speaking, not exactly voluntariness, but in essence it was. We'll get to this later. The biggest difference between amateurs and professionals is that while amateurs enjoy the game or participate in the play for non-instrumental purposes, professionals do it for instrumental purposes. That is to say that amateurs do not seek any other payoffs or any other benefits by playing the sports or the game, but professionals do. That is why Suits proposed to rename the amateur sports players or amateur games as autotelic activities and professional activities and professional sports into instrumental activities. Now, can you see where voluntariness comes into play an important role here? When a person engages in an autotelic activity, it is most likely that that person has made a voluntary choice. There was no external motive or payoff that compelled he or she to play the game, except for the game itself. But if the person decided to participate in an instrumental activity, it is most likely that their choice was somewhat compelled or coerced by external factors, the payoffs or the incentives that they gain by playing that instrumental activity. This part of the argument is very important because Suits believes that any kind of compulsion that a participant feels in order to achieve better outcomes, to get better incentives, like external incentive, is what turns play into something that is not play. So for example, if I'm recording this podcast purely because I enjoy doing podcasts, it's a play. But if I'm doing these podcasts for external purposes, maybe to get a good grade or something else, it might not be a play. Well, it's not a play. Anyway, so that was all about why voluntariness means so much things in deciding whether activity is truly a play or not. So let's get back to the Squid Game. The last question I want to ask all of you is whether Squid Game was a voluntarily participation-based game or not. Throughout the show, the conveners of the game try their best to make participants believe that it was always their own choice to participate in the game. It was always their choice to come back to the game. Yet, I think they are lying here clearly. There was no choice in the first place. The conveners of the game strategically chose people who are in desperate need of money and invited them to play in the Squid Game, which means that these people in the first place had no other options. They had no alternatives but to participate in the game because reality was no better. Therefore, people's decision to participate in the Squid Game was never based on their own voluntary will. It was based on the compulsion and the coercion intended by the conveners of the game. This is a very important analysis to note because if that is true, then according to Seuss theory, Squid Game is no longer in the realm of games or plays or any other kinds of autotelic activities. It becomes an instrumental activity. So, do you finally get why our podcast name is The Broken Game? Because the Squid Game was never a normal game in the first place. It wasn't fair at all like the frontman believed it to be, and it wasn't based on voluntary will of the participants. So it's out of any kind of philosophical standards of a game or a play. Yet, there's an interesting exception case to note, which is Ilnam, the grandfather, the number one participant, and the overall convener of the Squid Game in Korea. It turned out that Ilnam was actually playing game for the sake of playing game. So he was indeed actually participating in an autotelic activity, not instrumental activity. So at least from his point of view, you might be able to say that Squid Game was actually a game based on philosophical standings. However, it was quite disappointing to see that Ilnam, who was participating in an autotelic activity, was still using his own privileges and many backdoors to make sure that he doesn't actually die, unlike other participants. If he joined the game without any privileges, like equal with other participants, then the plot would have been much more interesting since to Ilnam, the Squid Game would have been an actual normal game based on philosophical definitions. As you can see, there are so many interesting philosophical ideas, thought experiments that can be derived from the whole plot of the Squid Game. Unfortunately, all the content and the theories that I have prepared for this podcast ends here. It has been a pleasure to be with all of you for many nights and many days with all these podcasts, and talking to you was so much fun. I hope you guys enjoy Squid Game for a lot of more times, and also you find a lot of joy within philosophers and philosophical ideas that I have introduced in this podcast. It has been an honor being a host of this podcast, and I will now bid you my last farewell. Bye bye and have a good night.